My family treated me like a failure, while praising my brother. When my business took off and I got my own house, they showed up like nothing happened. Then I knew why they were really there. Throw away because my family watches my man. Long post ahead. Please be kind. No wild language, no brands, just the facts and the mess that followed. If you've ever been treated like the family's cautionary tale, and then watch those same folks circle back the second you succeed, you'll understand why last Sunday morning changed everything. I was in my garage working on a custom motorcycle build when my Ring doorbell went off. Sunday morning, 9:00 a.m., and there's a whole parade of people on my front porch. At first I thought maybe it was some religious group or something, but when I checked the app, my blood went cold. Standing there like they owned the place were 7 members of my family who hadn't said more than 2 words to me in 10 years. My grandmother Patricia, my Aunt Monica and Uncle Steve, my cousins Tyler and Brandon, and my older brother Jake, with some blonde I'd never seen before. I'm Derek, 35, and seeing these people on my property felt like finding rats in your kitchen. For context, my house isn't some suburban cookie cutter. It's a 4,500 feet custom build on 5 acres outside Austin, complete with a 4-car garage workshop and enough land that I can't see my neighbors. The kind of place that cost me 7 figures but was worth every penny. My first instinct was to ignore them. These were the same people who'd cut me out of family gatherings for a decade because I chose to start my own construction company instead of following their safe corporate career path. But something about their body language, the way they were all huddled together looking nervous, made me curious. The security cameras had caught them pulling up in 2 vehicles, Jake's beat-up Honda Civic that had seen better days, and what looked like a rental car that Uncle Steve was probably going to expense somehow. They'd been standing there for a good 5 minutes before ringing the bell, clearly working up the nerve. I watched them through the app as they whispered among themselves, grandmother Patricia adjusting her handbag multiple times like she was preparing for battle. To understand why this visit was so mind-blowing, you need to know how we got here. Growing up in a working-class family in Houston, I was always the odd one out. My old man, Robert, was a shift supervisor at a chemical plant. My mom, Linda, worked part-time at a dental office. They were good people, but they had this narrow view of success: college, corporate job, suburbs, retire with a pension. My brother Jake was their golden boy. Straight A's football team captain, full scholarship to University of Texas for business. I, on the other hand, was the kid who took apart lawnmowers in the garage and built tree houses that looked like something from a magazine. While Jake was cramming for exams, I was learning welding from YouTube and building custom furniture in shop class. The difference in how we were treated was night and day. When Jake brought home a report card, it was celebration time dinner at his favorite restaurant, calls to relatives to brag about his achievements. When I brought home something I'd built in wood shop, a jewelry box for Mom's birthday that took me 3 weeks to perfect, the response was always the same. "That's nice, honey. Did you finish your algebra homework?" Every Sunday, we'd go to grandmother Patricia's house for dinner. She ruled that family with an iron fist, and her favorite topic was comparing all the grandkids to each other. Jake was always the success story. Tyler and Brandon. My cousins were finding their path, which meant screwing around in community college. And me, I was the creative one, code for future disappointment. The hierarchy was established early and never changed. Jake got the good seat at dinner next to grandmother Patricia, where he could regale everyone with stories about his academic achievements. I usually ended up squeezed between younger cousins at the kids' end of the table, even when I was 16 and 17 years old. The whole extended family had this obsession with appearances. Aunt Monica married Uncle Steve, who worked in middle management at an insurance company, and they acted like he was some kind of business mogul. They lived in a decent house in the suburbs and drove leased cars they couldn't really afford. But they played the part of success. Their social media posts were carefully curated to show expensive dinners, vacation photos, and humble brags about promotions and raises. The cracks started showing when I was 17. Jake was finishing up his sophomore year at UT, making good grades, dating someone our parents loved. Meanwhile, I was getting into trouble at school. Not for anything bad, but for skipping classes to work construction jobs under the table. I was making more money as a high school student working weekends than most adults in our family made in a month. The money I was earning wasn't just pocket change either. I was pulling in $800 to $1,000 per weekend, doing framing work, concrete pours, and finished carpentry. By senior year, I had saved up $15,000 more than my parents had in their emergency fund. But instead of being proud, they were embarrassed. When neighbors asked about my weekend jobs, Mom would quickly change the subject or make excuses about me helping out a family friend. When I told my parents I wasn't going to college, it was like I'd announced I was joining a gang. The fights were epic, Dad threatening to kick me out, Mom crying, calling me selfish and ungrateful. But the family reaction was even worse. At Jake's graduation party, Grandmother Patricia cornered me by the barbecue pit. "Derek, this construction phase needs to stop. You're embarrassing the family. Jake has a real future. You're just playing with tools." That conversation lasted 20 minutes with her listing all the ways I was disappointing the family. She brought up my cousin Michael, who'd gone to community college and now worked at a bank. She mentioned family friends whose kids were pursuing respectable careers in teaching and nursing. She even compared me to the neighbor's son who'd enlisted in the military. At least that was honorable service instead of manual labor. That's when I knew I was done trying to fit into their narrow box. I moved out the next week, got a job with Torres Construction, and started learning the business from the ground up. While Jake was partying his way through his final 2 years of college, I was mastering every aspect of the construction trade. My first apartment was a studio above a garage that I rented from one of the guys on my crew. It wasn't much, 400 square FT with a hot plate and a mini fridge, but it was mine. I furnished it with pieces I built myself and felt more at home there than I ever had in my childhood bedroom. The family's attitude became clear pretty quick. At family gatherings, they'd ask Jake about his internships and career prospects with genuine interest. When they talked to me, it was all polite questions about my handiwork and suggestions that I think about going back to school for something more stable. The condescension was subtle but constant. Uncle Steve would pat me on the shoulder and say things like, "Well, somebody's got to do the physical work, right?" Aunt Monica would ask if I was still doing the construction thing like it was a hobby I'd eventually outgrow. Cousins Tyler and Brandon, who were barely passing their community college classes, would make jokes about me being the family's muscle for hire. The breaking point came when I was 23. My brother Jake had landed a mid-level accounting job making $45,000 a year, which the family treated like he'd won the lottery. Meanwhile, I just started Rodriguez Construction with 2 guys from my crew armed with a $25,000 loan against my truck and every penny of my savings. Starting my own company wasn't a whim. I'd spent 5 years at Torres Construction learning everything about bidding, project management, permits, and dealing with suppliers. My boss was grooming me to take over, but I was too impatient to build something of my own. Those first months were terrifying, sleeping on invoices, hoping clients would pay on time, doing everything from accounting to cleanup myself, but we were getting results. Our first major project was renovating a 1920s bungalow, and the before and after photos started circulating around town. At Christmas dinner, I made the fatal mistake of trying to share my success. I'd just landed a $380,000 custom home contract, my biggest job yet. When I mentioned it, hoping for some family support, the response was brutal. "That's nice, Derek," Aunt Monica said, barely looking up from her phone. "But what happens when the construction market crashes? Jake has job security." Uncle Steve nodded along. "Construction is boom and bust, kid. You should think about getting your real estate license or something more reliable." What followed was a masterclass in backhanded compliments and concern trolling. They questioned my business model, wondered about my insurance coverage, and suggested I was being reckless. Meanwhile, Jake sat there smiling while everyone praised his smart career choice. But Grandmother Patricia delivered the killing blow. "Derek, playing contractor is fine for now, but when are you going to settle down and get serious? Jake's already talking about buying a house with Sarah. You're still living in that apartment working with your hands like a laborer." The word laborer was said with the same tone you'd use for criminal. In that moment, I realized these people would never respect what I did, no matter how successful I became. The irony was thick. Jake's secure job paid less than I was making working for someone else, and my new company was on track to gross $400,000 in its first year. I left early that night and didn't look back. The final straw came at Jake's engagement party. By then, my business was pulling in $600,000 annually, and I was personally netting about $180,000. I offered to help with costs. The response, "Thanks, but we've got it covered. Maybe just bring a nice gift." At the party, I was seated with family friends I'd never met while Jake's college buddies sat at the main family table. When Jake gave his speech thanking everyone who'd supported him, he mentioned his boss, professors, even friends from school. 8 minutes of gratitude for everyone who'd helped shape his life, and I wasn't worth a single sentence. That's when I stopped trying. If they wanted to pretend I didn't exist, I'd make it easy for them. The next 5 years were the most focused of my life. Rodriguez Construction went from 3 people with a truck to 20 full-time employees with equipment worth more than most people's houses. I specialized in high-end custom builds and commercial projects, the kind where clients don't ask about price because they know quality costs money. By 28, I was pulling in mid-6 figures annually. But I kept it quiet, drove the same F-250 work truck, lived in a decent apartment, and poured everything back into the business. The family had no idea what I was doing. When I ran into extended family around town, they'd ask how the construction thing was going with that same patronizing tone. Meanwhile, Jake's suburban dream was cracking. Word travels in small circles. His mortgage was high, plus car payments, credit card debt, and a wife with expensive tastes and no income. The real estate boom hit Austin hard around 2018, and everything changed for me. Suddenly, every successful business owner wanted custom houses, and they all wanted the guy who built quality without cutting corners. I landed 3 contracts in 6 months worth over $2 million total. These weren't ordinary projects: a 6,000 Fiat modern farmhouse for a tech founder, a historic downtown building conversion, a custom workshop for a rare car collector. Each project pushed my skills and built relationships with clients who became repeat customers and referral sources. That's when I bought 5 acres of hill country and started planning my own place. Not to show off, but because I wanted to build something that would last. The design process took months: traditional exterior, with every modern convenience built to last generations. Custom millwork, imported tile, commercial-grade everything. The garage was set up like a professional shop. The office overlooked my own engineered lake. By 2020, I was worth millions on paper. Rodriguez Construction was booked solid for 18 months out. I had employees making more money than most college graduates. But to my family, I was still just Derek who worked construction. The isolation didn't bother me. I'd built solid friendships with other business owners, craftsmen, and clients. Real relationships based on mutual respect, not family obligation. When my crew needed help, we had each other's backs. When my electrician's house flooded, we spent a weekend rebuilding his basement for free. I dated, but never got serious, especially after watching Jake's marriage implode when Sarah left him for a lawyer during his firm's downsizing. I had better things to do than play those games. The best revenge, they say, is living well. While my family was trapped in their suburban bubble defining success by appearances and social status, I was building something real. Every morning I wake up on my own land in a house I designed and built, surrounded by work that will outlast me. And you know what? It took them 3 years to even notice I was gone. When COVID hit, construction was considered essential. So while everyone else was locked down, I was busier than ever. People stuck at home wanted renovations, additions, custom offices. I added a second crew and started working on commercial projects for businesses adapting to the new reality. The pandemic created opportunities I'd never imagined. Restaurants needed outdoor seating areas built quickly. Office buildings required modifications for spacing. Families who were working from home wanted dedicated office spaces, home gyms, and outdoor entertainment areas. My company pivoted faster than most because we'd always been adaptable. While big construction firms were tied up in bureaucracy and change orders, we could bid on a project Monday and start work Wednesday. Clients were willing to pay premium prices for that kind of responsiveness. By 2021, I was doing several million in annual revenue and taking home a strong personal income. I bought a new truck, some investment properties, and started looking at expanding into Dallas and San Antonio. The investment properties were a calculated move. I bought distressed places in good neighborhoods, renovated them with my own crews during slow periods, and either sold them or kept them as rentals. It was a natural extension of my construction expertise, and it provided diversified income streams that didn't depend solely on new construction projects. That's when cousin Tyler's girlfriend saw my truck at a gas station and recognized me. She followed me on a social platform which I barely used but had a few photos of my work. Next thing I know, family members are creeping on my posts, seeing pictures of my house, my equipment, the high-end projects I was posting. My account was mostly a business tool, before and after photos of projects. Shots of the crew at work, occasionally a picture of a completed space. But to someone who knew me, it painted a clear picture of success. The projects were obviously high-end. The equipment was top of the line and the quality of work was undeniable. Suddenly, after years of silence, I started getting random texts. "Hey Derek, hope you're doing well. Saw your post about that mansion you built. Looks incredible. We should catch up soon." The messages were transparently fake. Tyler, who hadn't spoken to me in 6 years, suddenly wanted to grab coffee and catch up. Brandon sent me a friend request after ignoring my existence since high school. Even Aunt Monica started liking my business posts, which was funny since she'd spent years telling people I was wasting my life. I ignored them all. If they wanted to reconnect because they discovered I had money that told me everything I needed to know about their intentions, but I had no idea they were planning an ambush. I walked to the front door, steel-toed boots echoing on the entryway. When I opened it, the look on their faces was priceless. They were expecting the family failure they'd been talking about for years. Instead, they got a 6'2" guy in shape wearing a good flannel and jeans that fit. "Derek," grandmother Patricia spoke first, her voice trying to sound warm but coming off stiff. "What a beautiful home you have." "Yeah, well, hard work pays off," I replied, not bothering to hide the edge in my voice. The silence stretched on like a bad first date. Finally, Aunt Monica stepped forward with this plastic smile. "We were in town for the Johnson family reunion. You remember the Johnsons? We thought we'd stop by since we heard you lived out this way." The casual mention almost made me laugh. These people hadn't cared where I lived for 10 years, and now they're acting like we were close. Plus, the Johnsons lived 2 hours away, so this wasn't exactly a casual stop by. "How thoughtful," I said, my voice flat. "You want to come in, or are we having this conversation on the porch?" They filed past me into the foyer, and I watched their eyes go wide. Vaulted ceilings, custom ironwork, original art on the walls. The works. The entryway alone probably cost more than most people's annual salary. Custom wrought iron chandelier, imported stone flooring, with radiant heating, solid walnut staircase with hand-forged railings. Cousin Tyler couldn't help himself. "Man, Derek, this place is incredible. What did this run you?" "More than you make in 3 years," I replied without missing a beat. I gave them the full tour because I wanted to see their reactions. The living room with 20-foot ceilings and custom stone fireplace. The kitchen with professional-grade appliances and a center island bigger than most people's bedrooms. The office lined with awards and photos from high-end projects. Tyler kept making low whistles. Brandon was taking pictures for his girlfriend, which meant documenting everything to share later. Jake's new wife was calculating property values in her head. But grandmother Patricia's reaction told me the most. She was reevaluating everything she thought she knew about me. The grandson she'd written off as a failure was clearly more successful than anyone else in the family. And the real reason reveals itself. We ended up in the living room with coffee and pastries, small talk about weather, their drive-out safe topics that avoided the elephant in the room. I answered their questions about the house and business with just enough detail to make them understand the scale of what I'd built. The living room was designed for entertaining with a seating area that could accommodate 15 people comfortably. The fireplace was faced with stone I'd quarried myself from the property, and the mantel was a single piece of mesquite that I'd had milled and finished by hand. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided views of the lake and landscaped grounds. That's when Aunt Monica cleared her throat, the universal signal that we were getting to the real reason for their visit. "Derek, we've been thinking about family lately." She started using that careful voice that made my skin crawl. "Jake's going through some financial difficulties with the divorce settlement and legal fees." There it was, the setup. I kept my expression neutral and waited for the pitch. "Legal fees?" I asked, playing dumb. Jake looked uncomfortable, but Monica pressed on. "The custody battle with Sarah has been expensive. She hired one of those high-end divorce attorneys, and you know how messy these things can get." I knew exactly how messy they could get because I'd been hearing about Jake's divorce through mutual acquaintances for months. Sarah wasn't just taking half of everything. She was going for alimony, claiming she'd sacrificed her career to support his advancement. The fact that she'd never had a career to sacrifice was apparently irrelevant to her attorney. Uncle Steve jumped in. "Actually, Derek, I've been looking at some investment opportunities in the construction sector. With your expertise and connections, we could probably put together something lucrative for the whole family." I had to give them credit for creativity. Instead of straight up asking for money, they were positioning it as business opportunities and family support, but I could read between the lines. Jake needed cash, and they decided his successful brother should provide it. The investment opportunity angle was particularly insulting. These people who'd never shown interest in my business when it was struggling were now ready to become partners now that it was successful. They wanted to skip the years of long days, financial risk, and building relationships with suppliers and clients. Grandmother Patricia delivered what she thought was the closing argument. "We've missed having you at family gatherings, Derek. It's time we put the past behind us and started acting like a real family again. Family takes care of family after all." The audacity was impressive. After 10 years of treating me like an embarrassment, they were now ready to welcome me back to the family. As long as I brought my checkbook, I leaned back in my leather chair and studied their faces. These people had written me off when I was struggling to build something from nothing. Now that I'd succeeded beyond their expectations, suddenly they wanted to be family again. "Truth time," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Remind me, when was the last family gathering I was invited to?" The silence was loud. They all looked at each other, hoping someone else would answer. "Well," Monica said finally, "you know how it is with busy schedules and everything." "No," I interrupted. "I don't know how it is. Why don't you tell me?" More uncomfortable silence. They'd come here expecting the old Derek, the one who desperately wanted their approval and would do anything to belong. They were about to discover that version of me lived in the past. Jake finally found his voice. "Derek, I know we haven't been as close as we should have been." "Close," I interrupted. "I haven't received a phone call, text message, birthday card, or holiday gift from anyone in this room in over 8 years. You got married twice and didn't even tell me. Grandmother here told people that I was a construction worker who'd never amount to anything, and now you want to talk about being close?" Their faces went pale. The comfortable fiction they'd been living with, that our estrangement was somehow mutual, was being shattered by facts they couldn't deny. Tyler tried to play peacemaker. "Hey man, maybe we all could have done better at staying in touch." "Staying in touch." I stood up my full height, making them all look up at me. "Let me tell you about staying in touch. When I started my company, I called Dad to tell him about my first big contract. You know what he said? 'That's nice, son. Jake just got promoted to senior accountant.' When I bought this land and started building, I sent Mom pictures because I was proud of what I'd accomplished. She showed them to people and told them I was still playing with tools." The room was dead silent. Even the clock in the corner seemed to have stopped ticking. "When Jake got engaged the first time," I continued, "I offered to help pay for the wedding. Monica here told me they had it covered, but thanks anyway. At the reception, I was seated with people I'd never met while Jake's friends got the family table. When he gave his speech, thanking everyone who'd helped him succeed, he mentioned his professors, his boss, even his buddies, but not his brother who offered to help. Jake looked down at his hands. "Derek, I'm not done," I said, my voice getting firmer. "When Grandmother Patricia had her heart surgery 5 years ago, I drove to the hospital with flowers and offers to help with medical bills. The nurse told me visiting was for immediate family only. When I said I was her grandson, Monica here told the staff that I was just distant family and it would be better if I waited." That incident still burned. I'd driven hours after getting word about Grandmother's surgery, bringing flowers and a card with a check to help with expenses. Instead of being welcomed, I was turned away like a stranger. The nurse was confused, because I clearly knew family details, but Monica insisted I should wait until after the immediate family had visited. I ended up spending 4 hours in the hospital cafeteria waiting for permission to see my own grandmother. When I finally got 5 minutes with her, she was groggy and barely acknowledged my presence. I left the check with Monica, who never mentioned whether Grandmother even knew about it. Grandmother Patricia's face was white as a sheet. The reality of how they treated me was being laid out in detail, and there was no way to spin it. "So no," I said, sitting back down. "We haven't been not as close as we should have been. You cut me out of this family completely, and now that you found out I'm more successful than all of you combined, suddenly you want to be family again. That's not family, that's a transaction." The gold digger shows her true colors. That's when Jake's wife, who'd been quiet, decided to speak up. "Look, Derek," she said, standing up with this confident tilt to her chin. "I don't know what happened between you all in the past, and honestly, I don't care. What I care about is that Jake has been struggling financially since his divorce, and you clearly have more money than you know what to do with. Family helps family, period. The room went quiet. Even the other family members looked uncomfortable with her directness, but she kept going. I mean, look at this place. She gestured around the room. You're obviously loaded. Jake is your brother and he needs help. It's not like you earned all this yourself. You got lucky with some construction contracts during the boom. The least you could do is help out the family that raised you. I stared at her for a long moment, processing the sheer audacity of what she just said. Then I started laughing. Not polite chuckling, deep, genuine laughter that made everyone in the room shift. What's so funny? She demanded, her face flushing. You, I said, wiping my eyes. You're exactly what I expected. Jake always had a type, pretty entitled and completely unaware of how the real world works. Derek, Grandmother Patricia snapped. I ignored her and focused on the blonde. What's your name again? Brittany, she said, lifting her chin. Brittany, tell me, what do you do for work? I'm a social media influencer, she replied. Of course she was. How many followers? 12,000 on one platform, 8,000 on another. I nodded seriously. And how much income does that generate monthly? Her confidence wavered slightly. Well, it's building up. So nothing. You make nothing. I turned to Jake. Brother, you divorced a gold digger and married another. That's either really bad luck or poor judgment. Jake's face went red. Don't talk to my wife that way. Your wife just told me I should give you my money because family helps family, while admitting she doesn't know or care about our history. She called my success luck and claimed I didn't earn it myself. But I'm the bad guy for pointing out that she's a social media influencer with no income telling me how to spend my money. Brittany crossed her arms. I'm just saying, if I had millions and my family needed help, you'd— What? I interrupted. You'd give it away to people who treated you like garbage for 10 years. Tell me, Brittany, how much money have you given to Jake since you married him? That's different. How is it different? You married him knowing he had financial problems from his divorce. What have you contributed to solving those problems besides telling other people they should pay? The silence was heavy. She had no answer because the answer was nothing. But Brittany wasn't done. You know what your problem is, Derek? You're selfish. You have all this money and you're hoarding it instead of helping your family. Jake told me you used to be close when you were kids. Jake told you we used to be close. I looked at my brother. Is that the story you've been telling people, that we grew up close and drifted apart? Jake couldn't meet my eyes. Derek, we were close when we were kids. We were never close, Jake. You were the golden boy who did everything right. And I was the disappointment who chose the wrong path. That was the dynamic from day one. And you never did anything to change it. Even when we were kids, you went along with everyone else, treating me like I was somehow less than you. The numbers don't lie. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Brittany, you said I got lucky with construction contracts. Let me show you what luck looks like. I opened my banking app and turned the screen toward them. This is my business account. Current balance in the millions. That's just the checking account. Doesn't include investments, retirement accounts, or property values. Their eyes went wide, staring at the number on the screen. This house cost me a lot to build. I paid cash. The workshop has about hundreds of thousands worth of equipment. The trucks outside the F-350 dually cost a fortune. The vintage car I'm restoring is worth 6 figures when finished. And that's just the toys. I switched to another app. My investment portfolio is strong. I own several rental properties with solid equity. Last year, my company generated multi-million-dollar revenue, and I personally netted a high income after taxes. The quiet was intense. They'd known I was successful, but seeing the actual scale overwhelmed them. So when you say I got lucky, Brittany, what you mean is that I worked long weeks for 15 years, built a reputation for quality that commands premium prices, and made careful financial decisions. But sure, let's call it luck. The final truth bomb. Jake was staring at his hands. Derek, I had no idea. Well, no idea what? That your brother was successful, that I'd built something significant while you were playing office politics and getting taken to the cleaners. I tried to tell you about my success for years, you just weren't listening. I walked to the window again, looking out at my property. You know what the saddest part is? I would have shared all of this with family who actually cared about me. When I was building this place, I had visions of hosting family cookouts, having nieces and nephews come stay for summers, being the successful uncle who helped with school funds. Turning back to face them, I continued. But that required having a family that saw me as more than a disappointment. Instead, I built relationships with people who respected what I was building. My foreman, I helped him buy his own house. My office manager, I'm paying for her daughter's education. My concrete crew leader, I co-signed his business loan when the bank wouldn't approve him. Grandmother Patricia was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Derek, we made mistakes. Mistakes? I laughed once. No, grandmother, you told people you were embarrassed to have a grandson who worked with his hands like a common laborer. Monica told her neighbors that I was the family failure who'd never amount to anything. Jake didn't even invite me to his first wedding. I pulled out my phone again. You want to know about mistakes? Let me show you what you really lost. I scrolled through my photos and found the ones I was looking for. This is the children's hospital wing I donated to build last year. It's named after our great-grandfather, the one who worked construction his whole life to feed his family. Their faces went pale as they realized the implications. This is the scholarship fund I established at the community college every year for kids who want to learn trades instead of going into debt at four-year schools. And this, I showed them another photo, is the shelter I helped build and furnish, donated all the labor and materials. The hospital wing was something I'd been particularly proud of. The children's wing had been operating in a converted basement for years with poor lighting and outdated equipment. My donation helped fund a complete renovation with child-friendly design, natural lighting, and space for families to stay during treatment. The scholarship fund was personal too. Every year I selected students who wanted to learn trades but couldn't afford the tools and materials. The scholarship covered everything: tuition books, tools, work boots, safety equipment. Several of my recipients now worked for my company full-time. Aunt Monica was crying now. Derek, we didn't know. You didn't know because you never asked. You were too busy looking down on me to notice what I was actually accomplishing. I put my phone away and looked at each of them in turn. But here's the thing. I didn't do those things for recognition or to prove anything to you. I did them because it was the right thing to do. The moment of truth. Brandon, who'd been quiet, finally spoke up. Derek, is there any way we can make this right? I know we messed up, but family should mean something. I studied his face for a long moment. Out of all of them, he seemed to genuinely understand the magnitude of what they'd done. Brandon, family does mean something. It means being there for each other through good times and bad. It means celebrating each other's successes without jealousy. It means having each other's backs when the world tries to tear you down. I paused, letting that sink in. Tell me, when did any of you ever do that for me? He couldn't answer because the answer was never. You want to know what family means to me now? Last month, when the floods hit East Texas, I took 6 of my people and 4 trucks to help with cleanup and repairs. We worked for free for 2 weeks, helping folks rebuild their homes. Those people, they're my family now. We've got each other's backs because we chose to, not because we share DNA. The flood relief work had been exhausting, but rewarding. We'd worked long days clearing debris, tarping roofs, and helping families salvage what they could from waterlogged homes. My crew volunteered their time, and I covered all the expenses: fuel, equipment, meals, hotel rooms. We helped over 50 families get back on their feet. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. That's what family looks like. Now get out of my house. As they filed past me toward the door, each one looking defeated and ashamed, Jake stopped and turned back. Derek, I know I don't deserve it, but if you ever change your mind about giving us another chance... I looked at my brother. Really looked at him. The golden boy who'd had everything handed to him and squandered it through poor decisions and worse taste in partners. The man who'd stood by while his family treated me like nothing for 10 years. Jake, you want another chance? Here's what that looks like. You figure out your situation without asking anyone for help. You prove you can stand on your own feet. And most importantly, you learn how to treat people with respect instead of seeing them as either useful or disposable. He nodded slowly, eyes wet. And if I do all that, then maybe we can have a conversation about being brothers. But not until then. As they drove away, I stood in my doorway, watching their taillights disappear down my private road. For the first time in 10 years, I felt completely free of the weight of their expectations and judgments. My phone buzzed with a text from my foreman. "Boss, poker game tonight. You in?" I smiled and typed back, "Absolutely. Family dinner, right? You know it, boss." I locked the door and walked back to my garage where the Chevelle was waiting. Some things are worth restoring and some things are better left in the past. After 10 years, I'd finally learned the truth.